Homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. My name is Jennifer. Welcome to Miles Away Farm. Thanks for joining me in my kitchen. Today we are making beef tongue tacos. And if you are like me, you really believe in sourcing your food locally when you can or growing your own, and that includes the meat that you eat. I would estimate that pretty much all the meat that we eat at home is homegrown, or I knew the person who raised it. I do not worry about that when I'm in a restaurant because you have to draw the line somewhere, and I'm not going to be that person. We don't raise cows, but we do try to buy a quarter of a beef every year or so. And one of the things that I really believe in is using all of the parts. And so not just hoping that you're going to get lots of steak and ground beef and not having anything else to deal with. I want the bones for bone broth. I want the wobbly bits, as they call them, if nothing else, then for dog treats. And that includes the tongue. And so this is a beef tongue. They are huge, and it is quite the process to break them down. And so I really believe in using all of the bits. However, it took me, the first time I ever cooked a beef tongue was last year. I think I'd had it in a Mexican restaurant many years ago, and it didn't make much of an impression on me as being yucky. And so I knew that I would probably be okay eating it, but had not eaten it since. It's not obviously a common ingredient wherever you go. And then a friend of mine gave me one, and so it was in my freezer, and I was like, all right, I need to get over my squeamishness. I need to just figure out how to use this and cook it. The recipe that I'm using is based on one from Hank Shaw. I love Hank Shaw. He's a hunter, and so his website is Hunter Angler Gardener Cook. But he is an incredible resource. He has 4 or 5 different cookbooks out, and most of his stuff deals with wild game, but it all is infinitely translatable to domestic meat as well. And so I have several of his cookbooks, and I really trust him as a resource. Highly recommend him. Go buy his books. So this recipe is based on one from Hank Shaw, and that's how I'm going to cook this. When we did this last year, I did the same thing. I followed Hank Shaw's recipe roughly, and it came out incredible. Like, they were the most delicious, tender, sumptuous pieces of meat that I had had in a really long time. I was completely gobsmacked by how much I enjoyed it. And so while I had to get over my squeamishness, especially because whereas most of the time when you have a piece of meat, you don't know which part of the cow it came from, you look at a tongue, and it's really obviously a tongue. You know what it is. And so it definitely takes some work to get past that. What we're gonna do is simmer this for a really long time and then peel it. And so all this outside stuff that looks so unappetizing and is kind of gives you the heebie-jeebies, that's all gonna go away. We're gonna cook it and then peel it off, and that'll be gone. And then once you're down to just the muscle underneath, that's when the fun starts and you get some really delicious meat. So I encourage you to fight your own squeamishness, and I totally get it, and try beef tongue. If you raise your own cattle, or if you have friends that do, ask for the tongue. A lot of times they just dispose of them because people don't want them. So give it a try. It's really delicious. Let's get started. So I didn't get a weight on this tongue, but it's a good sized piece of meat. I would guess 3 or 4 pounds at least. And I'm just giving it a good rinse here. And you may find, because they're locally processed, a stray hair, so just pull that off. Putting it in a big pot. I could have done a slightly bigger pot on this. You want enough water to cover. I needed 5 bay leaves to go into this recipe, and this is a bay leaf tree that I've had for years that lives out on my front porch in the summertime, and then lives upstairs in my sunny commercial kitchen in the winter. And then we're also going to need a couple of onions. And a good handful of garlic. I'm going to bring that to a boil. And instructions will often tell you to skim off any protein scum that you see on the surface here. I didn't really have any on this, and so I just didn't bother. And then I'm topping that off just a little bit, and I decided to roll the tongue onto its side to get it a little more submerged, and I ended up rolling it the other way about halfway through cooking time. Tablespoon of black peppercorns, 2 tablespoons of table salt, And then we're just gonna let this simmer on nice low heat for 3 hours. So a good long time. And I'm sure that you could do this in an Instant Pot or in a slow cooker as well. Still looks like a tongue, just slightly less weird than it did. And this is still hot. It's easiest to peel, I find, when it's not completely cooled. And there's a little bit of extra fat here and there, but mostly this skin comes off pretty easily. You can just pull it off with your fingers. And I ended up feeding this to the dogs. They were super happy about it. And there's quite a bit of just fat left at the bottom there, so I did cut some of that off as well. Got it nice and cleaned up. And then I planned on slicing this while it was still warm, and then we had another event, and so I ended up stopping shortly into this and throwing it in the fridge and then pulling it out the next day to finish slicing it up. And it turns out, doing a little bit of research after I cooked this, beef tongue is quite fatty. It's actually higher in fat than most parts of the animal, and that is why it is so succulent and delicious, is because it does have a pretty high fat content in here. And we helped raise a cow in our back pasture last year from a neighbor. I didn't want something I needed to feed hay through the winter, but we did keep one in the back pasture during the late summer. And it turns out we found out that we do not have fencing for cows, and so we had some problems with them escaping once the grass got a little bit lower. But it turns out I really like cows. I've always just pictured them as big dumb animals, and by the end of the season, I had them eating ripe plums out of my hand, and I really enjoyed them. They were a lot of fun. I would totally do a cow if we had the right kind of land for it. We don't. I'm going to fry up some of this beef tongue, and so this is a little bit of rendered lard. Turns out this is totally unnecessary. This is traditionally how you would cook this in Mexico, and so I went ahead and tried it. But the meat is so fatty that you really don't need that extra lard other than just for texture, and so it did give it a really lovely crisp texture. And this cooks really fast because this meat is already completely cooked, and so all you're trying to do is just get some browning and some texture on there. Seriously, you guys, this is like bacon. It's so good. And then on to the tacos we go. And then obviously you can top your tacos with whatever you like. This is some canned red cabbage that I made last year. A little bit of acidity is really nice here. So, a squeeze of lime, do something with some acid in it to help cut through all of that richness. This is cotija cheese, which is a Mexican cheese that's a little bit like Parmesan. And then this is some of my homemade tomatillo salsa that I had left over from the salsa video that I just did. And so this was the little bit that was left that I didn't have room in the jars for it. Really nice combination. And there you have it, you guys. Beef tongue tacos, absolutely delicious. It's an inexpensive cut of meat. It's a lot of meat, and it's a great way to use up all of the animal. Give it a try, tribe. Thanks for watching, tribe. If you like this kind of content, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave me a comment, and share. I have new content coming out every week.